Title: Philadelphia Industrial Correctional Center. Purpose, structure, and its place in the jail system. Help this channel grow. Like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you. The story begins. In northeast Philadelphia, within the city's large detention complex along State Road, sits Philadelphia Industrial Correctional Center, commonly referred to as PICC. It is one of the primary jails operated by the Philadelphia Department of Prisons, and it serves a distinct function within Philadelphia's correctional system. Unlike current Fromhold Correctional Facility, which handles the bulk of male intake and long-term pretrial detention, PICC was designed with a more program-oriented mission. Its role has historically centered on housing adult men who are either serving short county sentences or are eligible for structured work, industrial, or vocational assignments while in custody. PICC is not a state prison and not a federal facility. It is a city jail, which means its population is shaped primarily by court decisions, sentencing practices, and case timelines within Philadelphia's criminal justice system. Most individuals housed at PICC are serving shorter sentences or have been classified as suitable for work-based housing, rather than high-security confinement. Origins and purpose. Philadelphia Industrial Correctional Center opened in the late 1980s as part of the city's effort to modernize its detention infrastructure. At the time, Philadelphia was attempting to move away from outdated facilities that had become overcrowded, unsafe, and poorly suited for rehabilitation or structured activity. The industrial designation in PICC's name reflected its original purpose. The facility was intended to provide work assignments, job training, and industrial programs for incarcerated individuals. City officials believed that structured labor and vocational opportunities could reduce idleness, improve behavior, and help prepare detainees for re-entry into the community. This focus distinguished PICC from other city jails. While security remained essential, the facility was designed to operate with a lower security profile than maximum supervision housing units. In theory, PICC would house individuals who could function safely in a more open, supervised environment. Classification and population. Placement at PICC is determined through classification decisions made by the Department of Prisons. Individuals assigned to the facility are typically assessed as lower risk than those housed in maximum security units. Classification considers factors such as charge severity, sentence length, disciplinary history, and behavior in custody. Many people housed at PICC are sentenced inmates, rather than pretrial detainees. This is an important distinction. Unlike pretrial detention, which involves individuals presumed innocent, sentenced incarceration follows a court conviction. However, sentence lengths at PICC are generally short, often measured in months rather than years. Because of this population profile, PICC has long been viewed as a bridge between incarceration and release. Its programs and work details were designed to impose structure while maintaining a degree of normalcy not possible in higher security housing. Work programs and daily operations. Work assignments have historically been central to PICC's operations. Incarcerated individuals have been assigned to jobs involving maintenance, laundry, food preparation, and other institutional tasks. Some programs extended beyond the facility, supporting city services under controlled conditions. Participation in work programs was not automatic. Eligibility depended on classification status, behavior, and staffing availability. Oversight reports note that when staffing levels were adequate, these programs helped maintain order and reduce tension within the facility. Daily life at PICC followed a structured schedule. Individuals were expected to report to work details, attend meals at designated times, and comply with movement rules. Compared to maximum security units, housing areas at PICC allowed for greater movement and interaction under supervision. Oversight and systemic pressure. Despite its program-focused mission, PICC has not operated in isolation from the broader challenges facing Philadelphia's jail system. Overcrowding, staffing shortages, and court delays have periodically affected its population and operations. Federal court oversight of Philadelphia's jails has included PICC within its scope. Consent decrees and monitoring orders addressing safety, medical care, and staffing applied system-wide. Court records do not portray PICC as uniquely problematic, but they recognize that pressures affecting one facility inevitably impact others. When population levels rise elsewhere in the system, PICC has sometimes absorbed individuals who might not otherwise have been placed there. This shift can strain staffing and reduce access to work programs, undermining the facility's original purpose. Medical and mental health care. Medical care at PICC is provided under the same citywide framework as other Philadelphia jails. Intake screenings, access to medication, and referrals to specialized care follow Department of Prisons protocols. While PICC population generally requires less intensive supervision than maximum security units, medical and mental health needs remain significant. Oversight reports have noted delays in care during periods of staffing shortages or population increases, reflecting system-wide constraints rather than facility-specific policy failures. Mental health services are available, but PICC is not designed as a treatment facility. Individuals with acute mental health needs are typically housed elsewhere. This classification-based approach is intended to match housing conditions with care requirements, though court findings acknowledge that gaps remain. Staffing and facility design. Staffing at PICC has historically differed from higher security jails. Officers supervise housing units that allow more movement, requiring vigilance and active engagement rather than constant lockdown. This operational model depends heavily on adequate staffing and clear procedures. When staffing levels drop, the facility's ability to operate as intended diminishes. Oversight reports document periods when work programs were reduced or suspended due to insufficient personnel. In such cases, PICC begins to resemble a standard detention facility rather than a program-oriented one. Public perception and reality. PICC rarely attracts the same level of public attention as larger facilities like Curran Fromhold. Its lower security profile and work-focused mission place it outside many high-profile debates about pretrial detention. However, its role is critical to understanding how Philadelphia manages sentenced incarceration at the city level. The facility reflects a broader philosophy that not all incarceration must occur under maximum restriction. When functioning as designed, PICC represents an attempt to balance accountability, structure, and preparation for release. Why PICC matters. Philadelphia Industrial Correctional Center matters because it illustrates how classification and purpose shape detention conditions. It shows how policy decisions about work, sentencing, and supervision influence daily life inside a jail. Its challenges are not unique, but they are instructive. PICC's effectiveness depends on staffing stability, consistent classification, and support from the broader justice system. When those elements align, the facility operates closer to its original mission. When they do not, its role becomes blurred. Understanding PICC requires viewing it not as an isolated institution, but as part of a complex network shaped by courts, policy, and resource allocation. Its story is not defined by scandal but by structure, and by how well that structure is supported. Daily life inside PICC. Work, structure, and system pressure. Daily life inside Philadelphia Industrial Correctional Center is defined by routine and classification rather than constant confinement. Unlike intake-focused jails, PICC operates around the assumption that most individuals housed there are capable of participating in structured activity under supervision. This assumption shapes how the facility functions, and also explains where it struggles when system pressures interfere. Intake and placement. People do not usually arrive at PICC directly from arrest. Placement typically occurs after classification, once the Department of Prisons determines that an individual is suitable for lower security housing or work-based detention. Many are serving short county sentences, while others may be awaiting transfer or release. This classification-based intake is central to PICC's design. The facility is not meant to manage constant turnover or high-risk populations. Instead, it relies on a more stable detainee group, which allows schedules and work programs to function consistently, at least when the broader system allows it. Housing and movement. Housing units at PICC are structured to permit greater movement than maximum security jails. Individuals are housed in dormitory-style units or lower security cell arrangements, depending on classification. Movement within units is more fluid, though still tightly supervised. This model depends heavily on staffing. When adequate numbers of correctional officers are present, units can operate with predictable schedules for meals, work assignments, recreation, and count times. When staffing levels fall, movement is restricted, and the facility begins to resemble more traditional detention housing. Oversight reports have repeatedly noted that PICC's operational model is sensitive to staffing shortages. Even small disruptions can lead to suspended programs and increased lockdowns, undermining the facility's intended purpose. Work assignments and industrial programs. Work programs are the defining feature of PICC. Individuals assigned to the facility may participate in jobs related to laundry services, food preparation, maintenance, sanitation, and other institutional operations. These assignments provide structure and help maintain daily order within the jail system. Participation is not guaranteed. Eligibility depends on classification status, disciplinary history, medical clearance, and staffing availability. When programs are fully operational, they reduce idle time and contribute to stability. When they are reduced or suspended, tension increases, a pattern documented in internal reports. Some work assignments support operations across the broader Philadelphia jail system, reinforcing PICC's role as a functional hub rather than a purely custodial space. Daily schedule. A typical day at PICC follows a regimented schedule. Individuals wake early, report to assigned duties, attend meals at designated times, and return to housing units according to movement protocols. Counts are conducted regularly to ensure accountability. Compared to higher security facilities, PICC's environment allows for more interaction and activity. However, this does not mean conditions are relaxed. Rules are enforced consistently, and disciplinary measures are applied when violations occur. Medical and mental health care. Medical care at PICC operates under the same citywide framework as other Philadelphia jails. Intake screenings are conducted before placement, and ongoing care is provided as needed. While the population at PICC is generally assessed as lower risk, chronic medical conditions and mental health needs remain present. Individuals with acute mental health needs are typically housed elsewhere, but oversight findings acknowledge that classification is not always perfect. When medical or mental health needs escalate, transfers may be required, which depend on bed availability across the system. Delays in care have been documented during periods of staffing shortages or increased population pressure, reflecting systemic limitations rather than facility-specific practices. Discipline and supervision. Discipline at PICC follows Department of Prisons policy. Rule violations are documented, reviewed, and addressed through graduated responses. Because PICC allows more movement, supervision relies on active engagement by officers rather than constant lockdown. Court monitors have noted that this environment requires experienced staffing. Officers must manage behavior proactively to prevent minor issues from escalating. When staffing is insufficient or officers are overextended, this balance becomes harder to maintain. Impact of system-wide pressure. PICC does not operate in isolation. When overcrowding increases at intake facilities like current Fromhold, pressure moves through the system. PICC may receive individuals who would not ordinarily meet its classification criteria, temporarily altering its population profile. These shifts can disrupt work programs and strain staff. Oversight reports have highlighted that PICC's effectiveness is closely tied to how well the broader jail system functions. Court delays, bail practices, and population surges elsewhere directly affect daily life inside PICC. The reality of PICC. Life at PICC is less about waiting for court and more about structured time. For many individuals, the facility represents a transitional phase between sentencing and release. The presence of work and routine can create a more predictable environment than other jails, but only when resources and staffing align. When those supports falter, PICC's distinct identity blurs. Programs shrink. Movement tightens. The facility becomes more custodial and less functional. Why daily life at PICC matters. Understanding daily life at PICC is essential to understanding its purpose. The facility was designed to show that not all incarceration must rely on maximum restriction. Its success depends on classification accuracy, staffing stability, and consistent policy support. PICC's challenges are not rooted in scandal, but in fragility. Its model works best under stable conditions and struggles under strain. That reality explains why the facility's role has shifted over time. Sometimes closer to its original mission, sometimes further away. Oversight, litigation, and the limits of reform at PICC. By the time Philadelphia Industrial Correctional Center had been operating for several years, it became clear that its success depended on more than internal management. Like every other facility in Philadelphia's jail system, PICC was shaped by federal court oversight, city policy decisions, and pressures originating far beyond its walls. Inclusion in federal court oversight. Federal court involvement in Philadelphia's jail system did not target PICC in isolation. Instead, lawsuits addressing overcrowding, safety, medical care, and staffing applied system-wide, covering all facilities operated by the Philadelphia Department of Prisons. Court rulings focused on whether conditions across the system met constitutional standards, particularly for pretrial detainees and sentenced inmates serving county time. Although PICC housed a different population than intake-heavy jails, judges and monitors recognized that systemic failures in one facility inevitably affected others. When population levels rose at larger jails, PICC often absorbed overflow or individuals whose classification might otherwise have placed them elsewhere. This reality tied PICC directly to the outcomes of court orders addressing overcrowding and population caps. Consent decrees and monitoring. As part of ongoing litigation, the city entered into consent decrees requiring specific improvements and continuous reporting. Independent monitors were appointed to assess compliance across facilities, including PICC. Monitoring focused on several key areas: staffing levels and officer deployment, access to medical and mental health care, use of restrictive housing and discipline, safety and supervision in housing units. Reports frequently acknowledged that PICC was designed to function with greater movement and programming. However, they also noted that this design made the facility more vulnerable to staffing disruptions. When staffing targets were not met, PICC's operational model quickly broke down. Staffing as a structural weakness. Staffing emerged as one of the most persistent issues affecting PICC. Court-appointed monitors repeatedly linked reduced staffing levels to the suspension of work programs, increased lockdowns, and diminished supervision. Unlike maximum security housing, PICC relies on active supervision rather than constant restriction. This approach requires sufficient staffing and experienced officers. When those conditions were not met, safety risks increased, not because of policy failures but because the model itself could not operate as intended. Court findings emphasized that staffing shortages were not unique to PICC. They reflected broader challenges in recruitment, retention, injury rates, and overtime dependence across the city's correctional workforce. Medical and mental health oversight. Medical care at PICC fell under the same oversight framework as other Philadelphia jails. Courts required the city to ensure timely access to care, medication continuity, and appropriate responses to emerging medical needs. While PICC generally housed individuals with fewer acute mental health needs, monitors noted that classification is not static. When individuals' conditions changed, transfers were sometimes necessary, depending on bed availability elsewhere in the system. Delays in care were documented during periods of population pressure or staffing shortages. Court reports framed these issues as systemic limitations, rather than evidence of deliberate neglect at the facility level. Reform efforts and policy adjustments. In response to oversight findings, the city implemented policy changes aimed at stabilizing operations across the jail system. These included revised staffing models, updated training standards, and efforts to restore suspended programs when conditions allowed. At PICC, reform efforts focused on preserving the facility's work-oriented mission. Officials recognized that when programs functioned properly, they contributed to order, accountability, and reduced tension. However, oversight reports made clear that internal reforms could not fully insulate PICC from external pressures. Court delays, sentencing practices, and population surges elsewhere in the system continued to influence who was housed at the facility and under what conditions. The limits of institutional reform. One of the clearest conclusions from court oversight is that PICC cannot succeed on its own. Its effectiveness depends on accurate classification, stable staffing, and consistent support from the broader justice system. Judges and monitors repeatedly emphasize that jails are reactive institutions. They respond to decisions made by courts, prosecutors, defense counsel, and policymakers. When those systems fail to align, even well-designed facilities struggle to meet their intended purpose. PICC illustrates this reality clearly. When population levels are stable and staffing is adequate, the facility operates closer to its original mission. When those conditions deteriorate, its distinguishing features disappear. Where PICC stands today. Today, PICC continues to operate under the same oversight framework as the rest of Philadelphia's jail system. Some improvements are documented, particularly in transparency and reporting. At the same time, recurring challenges remain. The facility story is not one of dramatic collapse or sweeping reform. It is the story of an institution designed for a specific role, operating within a system that often prevents it from functioning as intended. Why PICC story matters. PICC matters because it shows both the promise and fragility of program-based incarceration at the city level. It demonstrates that alternatives to maximum security detention can exist, but only with sustained institutional support. Its history underscores a central lesson of correctional reform. Facilities cannot fix systemic problems alone. Classification, staffing, sentencing, and court efficiency all determine whether reform efforts succeed or fail. Understanding PICC means understanding how policy decisions translate into daily reality. It is not a story driven by scandal, but by structure, and by the limits of what any single facility can achieve within a strained justice system.